What's up folks, it's Chili here. Today Microsoft just dropped a new teaser screenshot for their new DLC for Age of Empires 4, The Sultan's Ascend. And this screenshot all but confirms that the Byzantines are coming to Age of Empires 4. That's right, the Eastern Roman Empire. Not to be confused with the Holy Roman Empire, which was actually medieval Germany. What's funny is that I actually just posted my concept for how I would design the Byzantines. You can check it out in the description below. But today in this video, we're going to be taking a look at this screenshot, doing a little bit of a deep dive analysis, speculation, trying to figure out everything that's going on with this civ. So let's jump right into it. Alright, so I went ahead and highlighted everything that I see in this image, and let's take a deeper look into this here. Right up front here we got the mill. It looks to be a feudal age mill. It looks a little bit underdeveloped compared to the buildings around it. What's interesting is that in the game right now we have a few different styles of mill. There's the European style of mill, there's the Asian style of mill, and then most recently we got the African style of mill. This one looks a little bit different. It could be the Mediterranean style mill, and it could signal future Mediterranean style civilizations such as Venice or the Italian city-states, or maybe even Spain and Portugal. Similarly, next to it, we have this vineyard style of farm. Now in game right now, we have wheat farms, we have rice paddies for China. We've yet to see a farm styled like this, so maybe future Mediterranean civs will also use this kind of farm. I'm guessing this works just as a standard farm. It wouldn't really make sense for the Byzantines to have some kind of unique crop here. And on the bottom right, we have what looks to be the standard villager. It almost looks like they're wearing a little toga, which seems kind of cool. Of course, front and center, you see this winding aqueduct system. It almost looks like a stone wall. It's certainly built like a wall. You can see it kind of goes diagonal across the city. And at the endpoints here, we see what looks like cisterns. Now, historically, the Aqueduct of Valens in Constantinople was built back during the ancient Roman period, but during the Byzantine period, they would continue to improve upon it and extend it, going all the way up into the Thracian mountainside. Constantinople at its height was a city of 400,000 people. That's a lot of thirsty mouths, and there wasn't a lot of access to fresh water nearby, so they needed to pipe this water down into the city. And they would store this water in these giant cisterns that were these underground vaults of water, and they were littered throughout the city. In fact, to this day, these cisterns are still standing. You can actually visit it. It's a really cool tourist destination. They pumped out all the water so you can walk through them. What's really cool to me here is that I actually just posted a concept for how I would design the Byzantines, and I specifically highlighted how cool it would be to see a Byzantine base layout, kind of having this winding aqueduct go through the city. In this image, it looks beautiful. It looks unlike any other civilization in the game, and that's super exciting to me. One thing I want to note here is that it looks like the cisterns are actually placed right next to the aqueducts. There's multiple cisterns and they're right next to them. This could be the Byzantine influence mechanic. Every civ in the game has some kind of influence mechanic that dictates how you want to place your buildings. For the Byzantines, it could be that they want their cisterns next to aqueducts. Now, one thing that I struggled with in my concept was trying to get the player to extend the aqueduct throughout their civilization. If you know anything about competitive play, players are always trying to take the easiest route possible, the most cost-efficient route possible when they're laying out their bases, not necessarily the one that's going to make their base look the best. And so for me, I decided to make the aqueduct influence impact town centers as well as cisterns as well as landmarks. Now it doesn't look like that same thing is happening here, so my guess is that there's something motivating the player to place the cisterns at these particular locations. In the back here, you can see what looks like a town center, as well as a house, mining camp, the lumber mill, as well as this mystery building, which originally I thought was a town center, but upon closer inspection, it's a little bit unlike anything we've seen before, or maybe it's just a building flipped around at a weird angle. One thing of note is that all of these structures have this kind of beautiful blue tiling on the top. This looks to be the imperial style version of these buildings. Up front on the left here, we have the barracks, the arch range, and the stables. These all look pretty standard. And in the back here, we have a lot of interesting buildings here. Up front and center is what's probably the Hagia Sophia. Historically, this was one of the most beautiful churches ever built. Absolutely huge. Now, when you're looking at the Hagia Sophia, you might be wondering, where are the four towers that you see in the corners there that are in all the popular depictions of the Hagia Sophia? Well, it turns out that those were minarets that were a part of Islamic architecture added by the Turks after they conquered Constantinople. For Byzantine Orthodox architecture, you don't see those minarets. Me personally, I think that the combination of the minarets with the dome of the Hagia Sophia looks a lot better than just the Hagia Sophia by itself. It almost looks like something's missing here. In the back, we have this mystery building, which looks a little bit interesting. It could be a siege workshop. I'm not sure exactly what it is. And then on the left-hand side, this looks like a monastery. Up at the top we have both what looks like a keep as well as a really interesting building on the wall there. I'm guessing this is a wall-based landmark or a tower of some sort. Historically, Constantinople was famous for its Theodosian walls, some of the most impenetrable walls anywhere in the world, so it would make a lot of sense for the Byzantines to have some kind of landmark that focuses on their stone walls. This is very similar to how the Chinese have their Great Wall Gatehouse. Diving into the units here, we have the crossbowman. This looks like a pretty standard crossbow. The little circular contraption on the crossbow looks a little bit weird. Historically, crossbows were known as gastrophedes, which is how you describe the unit in Greek. I can't think of any famous crossbowman units for the Byzantines in history. They did employ Genoese mercenaries, but famously the Genoese mercenaries employed Pavese shields, similar to the arbaletraires in France. In my concept, I allowed the Byzantines to hire arbaletraire mercenaries, but it doesn't look like this is what they're doing here. Similarly in the back here, I don't know if you can tell, but there is a little archer guy over here. He's clearly holding a bow defending the wall. So the Byzantines will probably have standard crossbowmen and standard archers. Now in the middle here are these swordsmen, armored swordsmen. They've got these badass looking capes and these long ovular shields. Now these could be the skoukatos, which are the shield bearers, heavy infantry for the Byzantine army. I saw some speculation that these might be Varangian guards. I doubt the developers would miss out on an opportunity to have a really badass looking axe wielding unit, which the Varangian guards were known for using. My guess is that these are just the standard men at arms for the Byzantines. And you can see the marching information here, as well as here. You can also see standard looking Byzantine spearmen using a very generic spear that every other civilization has. Now highlighted in teal here, I have what looks like the horsemen for the Byzantines. Historically, the Byzantines did employ some interesting cavalry units, especially from the Balkan Peninsula, but I'm guessing that these are just standard horsemen. The way their helmets are designed, it almost reminds me of the companion cavalry from the time of Alexander the Great. They almost look like Boeotian helmets, but I think that's just the standard imperial look for the Byzantines. A lot of conical helmets. Now this is an interesting unit. This is probably a unique unit for the Byzantines. I'm guessing that these are cataphracts, extremely heavily armored soldiers with heavily armored horses. What's interesting here is that they're holding these ovular shields like the men-at-arms. Now historically, I don't think cataphracts had these large shields. It's really hard to use a shield that big when you're on a horse. And also of note is that they are not using lances, but they seem to be holding swords. You can see another example of the cataphracts from this angle over here. We also see what looks to be a Greek-style plume that runs down the top of the helmet like a mohawk. I think that's a bit ahistorical when you get to the later Middle Ages, but it could just be there to make them visually distinct from the other types of cavalry in the game. I do think the cataphracts will ultimately use lances. It doesn't quite make sense for them to use swords like this. Another thing to point out is that we have seen another cavalry unit in the game use large shields like this, and that's the sofas for Mali, and it could just be there to denote that these guys have quite a bit more armor compared to your standard cavalry unit. Now the guys I have highlighted here in purple are really interesting. Over on the left, that looks to be a Mongol Keshik to me. It looks like he has a face mask, the style of the armored horse, as well as the style of the halberd that he's wielding. Everything points to Keshik. And on the top right there, that looks like an Abbasid Ghulam, which is the men-at-arms for the Abbasids. Now the Byzantines were known to employ mercenaries, but they never employed mercenaries from the Abbasids and the Mongols. In fact, these were just rival empires to them. So it's really weird to see these making an appearance in this screenshot. This might be some sort of bait. I'm not sure exactly what this is. And lastly, I want to highlight this unit here in red. They almost look like archers, but I don't quite see bows on them. Could this be another unique unit? Maybe even the flamethrower? Historically, the Byzantines employed something known as the Kairos-siphon, which is a handheld flamethrower that they could use to emit jets of flame to devastating effect in naval warfare as well as in siege warfare. And the concept that I made, flamethrowers replaced the hand cannoneer because the Byzantine Empire was already falling apart by the time hand cannons became really popular. I'm going to be paying attention to these guys. This might just turn out to be really interesting. Alright, and that concludes my speculation. Was there anything I missed? Anything that you want to see in the Byzantines? Let me know in the comments below. And aside from that, have a good day. I'll see you next time.